Welcome to Australian Taekwondo Talk, where we meet the people who make our martial art great. Brought to you by Ageless Taekwondo, part of the Move It Oz initiative, a modified program for over 65s that's accessible, affordable and implemented in a community setting. Stay tuned to find out how you or a loved one can get involved.
Janine Watson's story is so remarkable, it's almost impossible to summarise. But, put simply, she is one of Australia's great para-athletes, and she is on the verge of para-Taekwondo history. Welcome to Australian Taekwondo Talk, Janine.
Hi, Aaron. Welcome. Thank you very much.
You are 6'2", smart, successful. You slayed any sport you turned your hand to when you were growing up. Did you always have big sporting dreams?
Sporting dreams, I'm not quite sure of. I hate running, but loved chasing a ball. So growing up, anything that had a ball and I ran about 10 metres, I would play. So netball, basketball, soccer as a goalkeeper, tennis, squash, you name it. But after 10 minutes, I just gave up.
Well, you are being modest. You were good. You had sporting talent, right?
Actually, I wouldn't say it would be talent. I would say more tenacious than anything.
Yes, right.
So it was a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a lot of, I'd say, obsessing of details to try and perfect the skills of the sport. But if you look at me, people would say, no, you don't have that natural talent.
And of course, growing up and well into adulthood, you weren't a para-athlete, you were just an athlete.
I was just an athlete. So I grew up in a small little country town in southwest Queensland called Chinchilla, and there was probably about 3,000 people there. And my parents said I was only allowed to play one summer sport and one winter sport. So, of course, being 6'2" at the age of 14, netball was an absolute definite sport that I played, as well as tennis was my summer sport. So there in that small little country community, I was playing against a lot of adults, and I just had that community spirit of what you have with those small country towns. I then went on to become a HPE teacher, so it was kind of a natural progression for me.
And that, again, is an indication that you were on a certain sporting trajectory. But had you got to the point in your life where you thought, okay, I am going to enjoy my sport from a teaching perspective as opposed to an athletic perspective? Had you got to that point?
I hadn't got to that point. It was a case of I was still extremely competitive, and I then want to try and do another sport as well. So even though I was out teaching, and a lot of people say that those who can't teach, but I still had that determination and tenacity that I wanted to compete.
When and how did you become a para-athlete?
I didn't have a traumatic accident or anything like that. So we sometimes joke about para-athletes of how we actually became para-athletes, and there's some amazing stories out there of how athletes have become a para-athlete. I, however, about the age of 25, for about 6 months, was finding that my vision was going on me. So I was a goalkeeper for soccer at that time, and I'd get blurry vision, and then I'd get double vision, and I'd have two balls coming at me, and then I would lose my sight completely. So that was a really scary time that I was going through.
Presumably you went and got it investigated, and what was discovered?
I did. So having a little bit of that science background, I knew something definitely wasn't right. I initially thought that there was just sweat getting into my contact lenses because it was only happening when I was doing exercise or sport. I finally did do the investigations, and I still remember the day that I got the diagnosis. So the neurologist said to me, "I'm terribly sorry, but you have multiple sclerosis. There's no cure for that. And without treatment, you'll be in a wheelchair within 5 years and a vegetable within 10. Don't expect to see your 40th birthday. My recommendation is go home and make yourself comfortable."
Was that a bolt from the blue? Did you have any reason to expect that news?
I sort of had an inkling. So before that actual diagnosis, they thought with tests that I could have had a brain tumour, or I could have had an aneurysm, or there was the possibility of multiple sclerosis. And in my mind, I'm like, I can deal with a brain tumour. I can deal with having an aneurysm. They can be fixed. Multiple sclerosis, there's no cure.
People have heard of MS, but they don't necessarily know what it is. What does MS do to your body?
Yeah, so a lot of people confuse MS with the ice bucket challenge, and that's actually muscular dystrophy. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disorder where your immune system attacks the brain and the spinal cord. So the easiest way I can explain it is my immune system, instead of targeting viruses and bacteria, it now targets the nerves and the brain cells. And what it does is it strips that outer protective coating of the nerves called the myelin. So if you happen to have an iPhone charger and you'll notice that that plastic always corrodes away and you have the exposed wires, that's essentially what's happening to me. So that protective coating called the myelin, or the plastic coating, is being eaten away, and it exposes those wires or the nerves, and you get short circuits, and eventually they don't fire at all.
And essentially that stops your body from performing the vital functions that keep you alive.
Yeah, it does. And a lot of people have a misconception about MS. There are, depending on what part of the brain is actually affected, depends on what symptoms you have. So some people can present like Alzheimer's, where they feel a little bit confused or forgetful. Others may present like Parkinson's victims, where they've got a lot of shaking. Or it's a case of other people end up in a wheelchair, which is the case for me.
You clearly didn't go home and make yourself comfortable and get prepared to die. So what did you do?
With any sort of traumatic event or diagnosis, you do go through sort of that grieving process. It took quite a while for me of that I'm going to die. I just turned 26. And being told that you're going to be dead by the time you're 40. You have a lot of confusion. You have a lot of people who aren't experts, but they want to give you your opinion. And for me, my comfortable place is to go home and just go under the doona cover and just pretend that everything's going to be okay. But I did that for a while and went, I can't keep doing that. And I decided one day that I need to choose to start living. If I just go into this, make myself comfortable and be scared of what's out there, I'd just be living in what time I had left as mediocre. And I've always been that I'd rather have quality over quantity. So I made that conscious decision to choose life. And that's where I started to do the biggest challenge that I thought there was, and that was Taekwondo.
How exactly did that unfold?
In Chinchilla, we had, again, being a very close-knit community, I couldn't do any more sports. I couldn't play tennis. I couldn't play soccer. I couldn't play squash because I couldn't see the ball anymore. So I was actually doing adult gymnastics, and that's completely hilarious given my size, but my log rolls are absolutely fantastic. And the instructor, she also was doing Taekwondo in the RSL hall, and she said, you should come and have a go. And I said, no. I said, I can't do that. I said, look at the size of me. I said, someone would just leg sweep me and I'd fall over. I said, I can't even touch my toes. And she said, they can't kick below the belt. Have a go. So I rocked up to the RSL hall, a place very familiar to me. If anyone's lived in a small little country town, the RSL is the place to go. And I had my very first session. Halfway through, I had to leave the RSL hall and throw up in the garden.
You're not Robinson Crusoe on your first Taekwondo experience there.
No, and people just laughed at me because it wasn't the first time that I'd thrown up in the RSL garden. But I can say for this time that it was exercise. And I just walked back in and never stopped.
Why did you know you'd found your thing?
I think for me, Taekwondo's given me not only the physical challenge, but the mental and the emotional challenge. For me, Taekwondo essentially is the reason why I'm here today. It is not only fantastic from a neurological point of view, so the amount of cross-hemisphere connections that I have now because of learning new patterns, doing things on both sides. And it's extremely important, particularly for an ageing population, that they've got that not only physical stimulation, but that mental stimulation. It also gave me, from an emotional and a spiritual point of view, my outlook on life, and it's that resilience and that tenaciousness to keep going.
Can you elaborate on that a little for us?
One thing that really drew me was the concept of the Utugi doll. So one of the tenets and a saying is, knock me down 7 times, I'll get up 8. And it's that resilience which really speaks to me. A lot of people say that I'm strong. I don't think I'm strong at all. If you think of a wooden ruler, it's strong, but you can break it and it never comes back. Whereas resilience is that you can be bent. So a piece of steel, you can bend it and it's put under pressure, but it comes back to its original form. It may not be exactly the same. There's still some dents and bruises from it, but you've bounced back from it. And I had that choice of, when being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, if I didn't bounce back, then I wouldn't be alive. And multiple sclerosis is a progressive disability, and I know that things get taken away from me each and every day in terms of physical ability. So if I don't have that resilience of being able to bounce back, then I'm not, again, choosing to live my fullest life.
When you step to the edge of the mat, what are the challenges that you face? How is your experience of Taekwondo different to that of anyone else?
My experiences are very, very different, but how I can explain it, so I'm going to say normal person, but I'm going to say able-bodied person. They're stepping on the mats, they got 3 rounds. So when I step on the mat, imagine that you have slept on your arms and legs and they've gone to sleep, and they've become numb, and you get that pins and needles feeling. So that's what I have 100% of the time. So for me to actually walk, it's quite painful. So I start my first round with my arms and legs completely in pain of those pins and needles. So then we go with the second round. You've finished the first round. Not only do you have the pins and needles, you then need to do a wall squat until your legs are absolutely jelly, because that's how you're going to then come out for your second round. By the third round, not only do you have the pins and needles, you have the jelliness in your legs. Then spin around 20 times until you get dizzy, and then go back out on the mat and fight. That's a way that I can explain what I do each and every day.
Why then? That's a horror show. Why do you persevere?
That is a very good question, and it's a question that a lot of people have asked me. And for me, it's not so much the fight of actually Taekwondo or competing in Taekwondo. It's my personal way of fighting against my diagnosis. And for someone to tell me that I can't do something and they focus on what I can't do, for me it's like, what can I do? And I get out there and go, yep, I'm dizzy, I can't see properly, but I can still kick really hard. So it's that, again, that determination and focusing on what we can do. And that's sometimes something that people forget about. They focus on what you can't do. But if we just focus on the cans and we work on that and we're grateful for what we can do, then we're living a full life.
So while that diagnosis was a terrible curse, indeed a life sentence in many ways, Janine, it also sent your life in a new and exciting direction, and at a particularly new and exciting time for the very concept of para-Taekwondo, didn't it?
It was, and listening to Daryl Sparks talking in a previous podcast, he talked about essentially that his accident led him on this path. And I think for me, as terrible as the diagnosis is, it made me again choose to live and choose to make a difference. And particularly with the parasport and para-Taekwondo, I think I'm here to be able to be that trailblazer, to open the doors that have previously been closed for people so that other para-athletes in the future, it's an easier path. They don't have to fight, they don't have to struggle, because I've already made that path and laid it down for them.
Can you speak a little bit about the trailblazing that you have done? What challenges have you faced, and in what way do you think you've cleared a path for those who follow?
So I'm a little bit unique because with para-Taekwondo for sparring, it was originally only upper limb amputees. And my first experience with para-Taekwondo was at the 2014 Commonwealth Championships in Scotland. And I had been classified for the Pumse and competed and won gold there for the Pumse. But they didn't know what to do with me. All I wanted to do was spar. And they said, we're sorry, we just don't have a spot for you. We don't have a classification. I went, that's okay. I'll just go spar able-bodied. So I just finished my Pumse, won the gold there, and then competed at the Commonwealth Championships in the able-bodied. That was the unfortunate time in which I lost my middle finger in that fight.
Oh, please, let's just divert and tell that story, because it's worth hearing, albeit if you're squeamish, you might want to fast forward a couple of minutes. But walk us through what happened in that particular occasion.
Yeah, so MS and not having feeling in your arms and legs can be of some benefit. So I'd finished the fight and I'd lost the fight. And I looked down and there was blood on my uniform. And of course you go, is that my blood? Is that her blood? You check your nose. Do I have a bleeding nose? And then I looked down at my right hand and the glove was just completely saturated in blood. Had no idea and couldn't feel it because I don't have feeling in my hands. They took the glove off, and what had happened is my opponent had kicked my finger and it had bent completely back, and it was just hanging by the knuckle with the tendons and the skin. And you had that lovely arterial spurt and everything coming through, and I'm looking at it going, oh, this is really cool, and because I had no feeling, and the team physio's almost vomiting and going white. So they then rushed me off to hospital and they had to reattach my finger. And they said, okay, we're going to put you under general anaesthetic. We'll reattach the finger, but you'll have to stay in hospital for the next couple of days. And I said to them, no. I said, I've got to fly out tomorrow night. And they said, no, we have to attach the finger. And I said, yeah, but can you do it under local anaesthetic instead? And the surgeon just looked at me and he's like, are you serious? I went, yeah. I said, I got no feeling in my hand. Just do it under local. I'll be fine. I can fly out the next day because I had to go to work the next week. So they did that. They reattached my finger under local anaesthetic. But the interesting thing is because I was still awake, I could hear everything that they were doing. And the surgeon actually had a trainee surgeon with him. And so he's just poking and prodding and telling her, okay, have a look here and see how this is moving and this should be there. And I'm listening to it all. And then he said, okay, I'm going to let you reattach it to the trainee surgeon. And I sort of was going, oh, the words that I never will ever forget, and my heart rate went through the roof, was the surgeon said to the trainee surgeon, no, not like that. I just saw, and I'm like, oh my God, has she put it on backwards? What's happening? What's going on? Safe to say, it was reattached all nice and well. I've got a tiny, tiny little scar. My finger is a little bit longer than my other middle finger, and it's a little bit twisted to the side, but it still works perfectly okay.
Did you make the plane?
I did make the plane, yeah.
Having had that enjoyable or at least graphic little diversion, let's return back to the challenge of not knowing what to do with you. There not being an established pathway for somebody like you. What has changed between then and now, if anything?
Well, since then, so I then came to the realisation, okay, I can still do Pumse, loved Pumse. I'm one of those rare people that do both Pumse and sparring, even though I had multiple people tell me you've got to choose one. I said, nope, I'm going to do both. So I was unable to spar anymore. So I wasn't able to spar with the able-bodied. There was a duty of care. And they were concerned that someone with the amount of brain damage that I had, it would be too much of a risk to be fighting with head kicks. So I sort of had the realisation and acceptance I'm not going to be able to be competitively spar. So in 2015, I won my first World Championships in Turkey for Pumse. And then also in 2017, I won my second World Championships for Pumse.
What was that moment like, given that some years before you would have had visions of a horrific life dancing in your head? What did it feel like to be on the dais at that moment and be crowned a world champion?
It was a kind of surreal sort of moment. It was a goal that I wanted to. I'd set my standards high. I wanted a world championship. And when I had won my first world championship, I sort of thought to myself, well, what do I do now? Very similar to people in Taekwondo who set the goal of they're going to be a black belt, and they get their black belt, and then they sort of think to themselves, well, what do I do now? I've achieved my goal. So I then looked at and went, another para-athlete, Steve Curry, he had already won 2 world championships. And I said to him, my goal is to get more world championships than you. And we competed together in London in the world championships in 2017. He was sparring while I was doing the Pumse. And I had, at that point, completely accepted that I couldn't spar anymore. Then in June in 2018, I got a phone call and it was, they've changed the classifications. You can spar. You need to get your butt to career in 3 weeks' time. So not having done any sparring training for about 3 or 4 years, I had 3 weeks to quickly brush up on new rules for para-Taekwondo as well. And I flew to Korea and I won the bronze medal there.
What does that reclassification and obviously that success mean for your future?
At the moment, they're trialling people with neurological impairments in sparring. I've been their guinea pig as such all the way along. But what that means, it meant for me, is that the Tokyo 20 Paralympics was now a possibility for me. It was a new goal that I could set and aim towards. It means that more people who have neurological impairments can actually spar, and it's a great step forward because more people are starting to be included in para-Taekwondo.
Where is your Olympic journey at right now?
My Olympic journey is I have recently qualified for the Paralympics. So we had on the Gold Coast on the 29th of February this year our Oceania qualifiers, and both myself, Steve and Cara, who is our other para-athlete, we all qualified for the Paralympics.
How does that feel?
It's a good stepping stone. It's you break down your goals into smaller goals, and this was a smaller goal of we just needed to qualify, and now it's a case of reassessing and refocusing, and particularly for us, refocusing for next year.
Because timing is everything in life, and Tokyo 2020/2021 is going to be the first time a Paralympic Taekwondo gold medal is awarded.
That is. So para-Taekwondo makes its debut at Tokyo, and it's an absolute fantastic achievement for para-Taekwondo worldwide.
I have to ask, you said that there is an inevitable deterioration. Are you maintaining your skills? Are you maintaining your dexterity? Are you maintaining your fitness? Will you still be at the peak of your powers when Tokyo rolls around?
It's hard for me to gauge what the future is. So having a progressive disability, time is not my friend at all. So I know that each and every day I get worse. And it's a case of how much is it going to get worse by this time to September next year. So it's always in the background, but I can't focus on it. It's if I keep thinking, what if I can't, my legs don't work? What if I'm permanently in a wheelchair? What if my sight completely goes on me? If I keep thinking about that, that's just wasted energy. So for me, I'm grateful for every day. So I wake up and I don't know if I can walk. So it's the unpredictability of the disease. I could have an absolutely fantastic day. I could have a very terrible day. So for me, it's about waking up and going, what can I do today? So while we've been in isolation, I've been working on my strength. So having multiple sclerosis, it's been very, very hard being in isolation with the pandemic because of the chemotherapy drugs that I'm on suppress the immune system. So it's difficult to actually go out when you don't have an immune system.
Do you have bad days? No, I don't mean physically. I mean psychologically. You are clearly an incredibly strong person, but you have a harsh reality to process. Do you have bad days?
Definitely. What a lot of people see is that positive side and that I'm kicking goals and I'm doing fantastic, but there's also, unfortunately, the dark side of having that progressive disability. And I've struggled with depression and anxiety, and I'd have to say that I tried to do it by myself. I didn't want to get help, and I just got worse mentally. You sort of get into that spiraling loop of just the depression, and you're focusing on the negatives. I work very closely with sports psychologists and also clinical psychologists because it's a lot to deal with. You're going to have the bad days, but it's okay. Like I said, I might make a little doona fort and hide under the doona, and I might have a cry and say, why me? This is too hard. I'm just going to give up. But then I've got this other little voice inside of me that just says, are you done now? You stop being a drama queen? Pick yourself back up. Focus on what you can do. So that's my life.
What do you hope your legacy will be?
My legacy, again, is to be that trailblazer. I initially had my journey was a personal journey, and it always was a personal journey. It was me fighting against multiple sclerosis. But then I started to have people say, I started Taekwondo because of you, or I heard you speak and now I do this. And I struggle with the concept of being an inspiration. People come up to me and say, you're so inspirational. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. I'm just doing what I'm doing. But then I've sort of looked and I've looked at the number of people out there with disabilities, and there hasn't been a place for them. There hasn't been a role model. They're young children who want to have a go, who want to focus on what they can do, and they get shut down and they go, I can't do that because there's no one else that I can look up to. It's fantastic to see now the amount of people who have intellectual impairments as well as physical impairments, not only participating at their local Taekwondo club, but also competitively. So I am in absolute awe of Jack, who's in Perth, who competes in Pomsday, and he has the best fun out there. And there's also Grace, who's a young up-and-comer from Sydney. I want them to be able to achieve their goals and make it. And for me, if I can say, yes, you can do it, and I can show them that they can do it, then that's my legacy. I want to have as many people as possible participating in Taekwondo and para-Taekwondo.
You have credited your involvement with Taekwondo in keeping you alive, certainly making your life better than it might otherwise have been, let alone all of those tangible successes like world championships. But what is it about Taekwondo that makes it more meaningful to you than javelin would have been, or you're a goalkeeper or a netballer? There are para versions of those sports. Why was Taekwondo the right thing for you to pursue?
I think Taekwondo for me, again, that emotional and spiritual side, it made me be more mindful. It made me be in the moment. It made me stop overthinking, and I became more humble. I became more resilient, and I looked at others and how can I help others rather than just being absorbed with yourself and stuck on your phone, and giving back and having that self-discipline and not giving in to the excuses. It's also, I find with Taekwondo, where you can get the most progress. So you're never going to learn anything or make progress in the comfort zone. So Taekwondo gets you out of your comfort zone, and it does that deliberately so that you can grow and progress and learn and be a better version of yourself. And I work quite a lot with young athletes, and just to watch them struggle to try and learn a new technique, but then the look on their face when they finally get it, and that sense that they've achieved something and their self-worth has improved. That's what Taekwondo does.
There's a real paradox in what you're saying right now. You got a diagnosis that was going to take everything away from you, and ultimately you're talking about all of the things that you have gained, from perspective to possibility. There's a real paradox there.
It's an extreme paradox. I would have to say no one wants to actually know when they're going to die, and definitely how they're going to die. I know how I'm going to progress, and I know what will happen to my body. And the thing is, for me, is I just don't know the time. It's a case of just be mindful and grateful of each and every day. And if you can get out and do something, do it. And with Taekwondo, it's that click, it's that I can do this, and I forget about everything else and I focus on what I can do. And Taekwondo is not just for people who have a disability. It's for those people who may be a little bit older and scared and go, I can't do a martial arts. There's no way I can do that. It's just have a go, and it's your personal journey, and you don't have to compete against anyone else. And it's okay if someone else can do something that you can't. You just need to focus on you and what you can do.
I hate the word inspiration as well, but I'm happy to use the word aspiration. I aspire to get the balance and the focus and the drive that you have managed to find in your life. It's a powerful message that you've shared today. I love watching that power play out when you are competing in Taekwondo, and I just hope that everything falls so that you get the opportunity to go to Tokyo and continue to blaze that new territory for Taekwondo on behalf of all of us who love it and all of us who'd like to see somebody succeed when they've initially been knocked down. Thank you so much for telling us your story, and good luck with all that lies ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And like I said, get out there, have a go, and focus on what you can do, and don't let anyone stop you because of things that you can't do.
Now let's learn more about Ageless Taekwondo, part of the Move It Oz initiative.
So far on Australian Taekwondo Talk, we have spoken to the designers of the Ageless Taekwondo program and come to understand how it has been created and how it should be executed. We've also spoken to instructors as to what it looks like out there in real life. So we thought it was time to talk to a participant. And we have one in the form of Teresa Hill, better known as Tess. She trains at the Sunshine Centre at Howrah in Tasmania. And we started by her telling me that her sister tipped her into Ageless Taekwondo.
And she thought I needed the exercise as I was getting quite old, and thought I needed to do some strength training, and she thought it would be good for me, which just turned out to be the case.
Did you go enthusiastically or reluctantly?
I went apprehensively because I'm not always that sort of certain that I can do things. But once I got there, all my fears were totally allayed, and I thoroughly enjoy it now.
What do you remember of that first day?
Fun. I think I had muscles that I didn't know I had. I didn't even realise that I was exercising parts of my body. So the whole experience was absolutely amazing. It was physically and also mentally, it was just an experience that I thoroughly enjoyed.
How long have you been doing it now?
This is my second year.
And do you feel you've improved?
Absolutely. In fact, when I stand up now, I usually try and even, putting on clothes and things, I will just, even when I get out of the bath, I will stand on my leg for as long as I can and alternate, whereas I probably wouldn't have been able to do that a couple of years ago. I think I've just developed more sort of core strength. And I'm very conscious of the things I do now, just sitting and even going up steps and things like that. Tend to sort of stand straighter, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense, because posture and bone density and quality are key concerns for ageing women, right?
Absolutely.
Tell me what happens in a typical session.
In a typical session, okay, sometimes we will start off with interactive games, say using a shuttlecock or a tennis ball or things like that. And honestly, the levity and the jocularity and the fun, I mean, we're all laughing. It gets the heart rate up without you even realising. And just getting to know everyone's weaknesses and strengths, and it doesn't really matter because everybody seems to do things differently. So I think that's probably the nicest thing that I get out of it, is that everybody just all blends in. Different age groups and, some older people and, so it's usually just a a bit of a groupy thing, as I said, using some type of equipment, and then we'll do individual sort of stuff, a lot of strength stuff, and then he incorporates, Taekwondo moves, and I have found that really, really beneficial, whereas probably a couple of years ago I wouldn't have gone for a walk on a track on my own because I, felt sort of defenceless, but now with just those few sorts of defence moves, and I now feel as though that, I can look over my shoulder and think, oh, I'm feeling not so threatened.
That's really interesting to hear, because one of the key hopes or ambitions of the program is to boost physical self-confidence. And you're saying as an older woman, you very much feel that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, I don't like going on walks on my own unless it's just around, the streets where I know that there will be people. And sometimes on nice little, bushwalking tracks, a little bit far removed, I wouldn't have done it. But now I'm not quite so hesitant in venturing to different areas on my own.
I want you to give some advice to two potential people listening. The first is an instructor somewhere who has a club or has a hall and has the opportunity to start ageless Taekwondo but hasn't yet. What recommendation would you give to him or her? To emphasise the fact that you don't need any skills or sporting prowess or anything like that, and to not feel overwhelmed that you may not be able to do it, and that you will actually get so many more benefits from joining in a group. Because I think, not as I said, the physical part of it is brilliant, but also the mental and I guess self-esteem. Well-being, might that be the word?
Well-being, yes, probably well-being, yes. Confidence, I think probably confidence.
So you've probably answered then the second half of the question that I wanted to ask you. What if you were somebody like a Tess or a Terry who hasn't yet embarked on it and has all those same preconceptions or misapprehensions? What would you say to them?
Go for it. If you don't like it, don't do it. But you don't know until you give it a go. And as I said, I didn't think it was for me. I thought, not really into martial arts and things like that. But I think it's probably a bit of a misnomer saying it's a Taekwondo class. I think it's more self-confidence and motivational classes and confidence building, and also a bit of strength training, which it's given me a whole different outlook on things. It's like it's a can-do attitude now.
Tess, you're living proof that done well, it has great results. Thank you for sharing your ageless Taekwondo experience with us.
And I think the instructor has got a lot to do with that too, just the way he presents it. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He has that way with people at whatever age and level. He can just interact, and he just gives people confidence just by, I don't know, his whole manner and demeanour. And as I said, the people that he attracts to the class are sort of like-minded, and everybody just gets on so well. So, yeah, can't recommend it highly enough.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience, Tess. And that is it for this edition of Australian Taekwondo Talk. You can find us in Apple iTunes, on Spotify, look us up on YouTube, we're on Red Circle. Wherever you find us, please subscribe so that each new episode gets delivered straight to you. Please rate it and review it. The reason why we do that is it makes it easier for others to find, and it's how you can spread the word about Taekwondo generally and Australian Taekwondo in particular. But the best thing you can do is share it directly through email to your club members, through newsletters, word of mouth, put it on your social media. Hell, ring somebody and give them the tip if you like. It's really valued by us, and I think it's a really great way to give people a sense of why you love Taekwondo. I'm Aaron Carney. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time on Australian Taekwondo Talk.
For more information on how you can get involved with Ageless Taekwondo and a whole lot more, head to ostkd.com.au. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram too. Thanks for being a part of Australian Taekwondo Talk.